All right, at Leon-JP7CH. You're being really dishonest here, without a shadow of a doubt. You pick up secular Jews and introduce them to a new faith completely foreign to our forefathers. How about encouraging them to know Judaism thoroughly before they unknowingly participate in a new faith full of idolatry? You will be called to account for your abominable misdeeds against God's chosen people. God's chosen people are not meant to be joining a foreign faith that Abraham, Moses, David, etc. would not have recognized, a faith based on human worship. It is a fact that 99.9% of so-called newly saved Jews to Christianity have a non-religious background, zero knowledge of Judaism. They usually have a heavy baggage full of misery, according to a large number of testimonies. Wow, this is pretty full.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, and I actually counted there's about 7 points this person makes in this comment. And it's a pretty, honestly to say, it's a pretty vapid response containing no theology whatsoever with this made up percentage figure. And the first, I want to kind of like go through the points one at a time here
Okay.
because they all deserve to be given attention. And the first one is you are being really dishonest here without a shadow of a doubt. If someone says that someone is dishonest, that would mean that the person that's being dishonest doesn't actually believe what they say and that they're intentionally trying to deceive people. What do you say about that?
Sure, that's one type of dishonesty, which I think that people can watch, our conversations on the streets and judge for themselves if they think we're sincere, which we're being extremely transparent in that sense, right?
Right.
We're putting our conversations on the internet. So there's a level of transparency there. I also think someone could mean dishonest in the sense that we're not upfront with who we really are and what we really believe. And I guess I could see that point if, our organization was operating under, and I like saying, oh, we're Jews for recycling, and or something. And then
Right.
you find out later, oh, actually they believe in Jesus and they weren't
Right.
upfront or something. But we call our organization Jews for Jesus for this exact reason, to
Right.
just put it right out there from the beginning. This is who we are. When we go out and talk to people on the streets, before we have a camera on, we always tell them what we believe and the type of channel that it is. And there's nothing that we surprise people with later,
Yep.
because that's the whole point. We want to have honest dialogue with people, and you can't have honest dialogue lacking the fullness of
Yeah.
who we really are, right?
And people will ask us, why don't you have more arguments up on your channel? Why aren't people more aggressive to you? And honestly, it's because we're upfront and honest. And the people that we'll walk up to someone and say, hey, we are Jewish believers in Jesus. We have a YouTube channel. Here it is. It's called So Be It by Jews for Jesus. And we are asking people questions on the street about faith. The question today is, and then would you like to be filmed? And the people that say sure, those are the people that we film. And the people that say, no, 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 we don't want to have anything to do with you. We don't want to talk to you. Stop doing what you're doing. They don't want to be filmed. And out of respect, we don't film them. But we even
Mhm.
still engage off camera with these people after full disclosure. And so that's first and foremost. Yeah. So the next point is you pick up secular Jews and introduce them to a new faith, completely foreign to our forefathers, Abraham, Moses, and David, etc., who would not have recognized it. So this person, I mean, must not be familiar with the channel because we have many videos where we discuss these things with Orthodox Jews most of the time in Jerusalem. I mean, they're everywhere here in Israel, but most of the time in Jerusalem. And some of our most watched videos are the videos where we're interacting with Orthodox Jews. And so regarding it being a foreign faith, I want to address that because we see, as Jewish believers in Jesus, we see faith in Jesus as a fulfillment, not a replacement or not a new faith. It's a fulfillment. So as Jewish believers, we step into faith in Messiah, as was promised in our Tanakh. We spend a lot of time in the Tanakh. We spend a lot of time going deep and studying, and we see Jesus, Yeshua, as the fulfillment of the promises made in the Hebrew Scriptures. So it's not a foreign faith because we take our guidance from the Word of God from the Old Testament, from the Tanakh, which leads us towards Messiah. Jesus said himself in Matthew 5:17, I have not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. The apostles were Jewish.
Yeah.
They understood Jesus as the promised Messiah of the Hebrew scriptures. And so, we just see the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures pointing to Jesus. It's not some foreign made up religion after a certain period of time. And this person brought up, key figures of the Hebrew Bible, such as Abraham, David, and Moses. If we're going to go there, many of the key figures of the Hebrew Bible, such as Abraham in Genesis 12:3, he's going to be a blessing to all nations, showing God has a plan for the Gentiles. Moses in Deuteronomy 18 says that God will raise up a prophet like me from among your brothers. Listen to him. And David from Psalm 110, which is basically a messianic prophecy pointing to the coming Messiah. So Isaiah 53, which is a key passage in the Tanakh, clearly describes a suffering servant who followers of Jesus believe is the Messiah. What do you say?
We got a request a couple months ago, I think, for an order of Hebrew New Testaments from a rabbi who wanted to give them to his students because he said, I'd rather them become Christians. If they're not going to be Orthodox Jews, at least they could become Christians. That would be better than becoming secular Jews, which I thought was a very, very interesting comment to make. And I think it shows that as Jewish Christians, as Jewish followers of Jesus, we have a lot in common with Orthodox Jews in the sense that we are pursuing a faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, of course, we disagree on some of the finer points of that, but secular Jews, to me, are more in the direction of following something foreign, you could say. I mean, what
Right.
is more foreign than a Jewish person who doesn't believe in God?
Got it all.
Like, I think that that's a more far removed. And
Yeah.
we share the same heart that our Orthodox Jewish brothers and sisters share to see Jewish people who are not engaged in faith whatsoever return to God.
Mhm.
And so I think we have a lot in common with Orthodox Jews.
Yeah. And I see also the outreach that Chabad does. And I just want to kind of give a shout out to Chabad here, not because of the theology, but because of the fact that we have some of our most amazing conversations with Chabad Jews and how
Yeah.
they reach out all over the world, giving social services and helping Jewish people stay connected to their Jewish roots and heritage. And we have some of the most amazing conversations with them. And we see eye to eye on a lot of theological perspectives, but just there's a little bit of a divergence when it comes to who the Messiah really is and when he was supposed to come. But if we want to talk about faith that's unrecognizable, rabbinic Judaism today is so far removed from biblical Judaism.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, rabbinic Judaism, including the Talmud and many of its practices, developed centuries after the first century. And it's not the same as pre-first century Judaism, which is what Jesus and the apostles actually practiced. In fact, the Talmud was written well after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, after the rise of faith in Jesus, reflecting on a focus like it focused away from the biblical Jewish faith of the time. So it's actually rabbinic Judaism today is post first century or post Christian Judaism. And that is a Judaism that Abraham, Moses, and David wouldn't have recognized. And why? Because there's no evidence of Talmudic practice in the time of the forefathers. I mean, I'm not talking about oral traditions. You know,
Sure.
all
Yeah.
cultures have oral traditions. I totally agree that Judaism has oral traditions that were passed down from generation to generation, although not legally binding and as this oral authority given to Moses on Mount Sinai, along with the written Torah or written law. I
Well,
mean, yeah,
this is one of the things that, like, to what the point that we're discussing, that Orthodox Judaism and Christianity have in common, right? Is both of them are trying to answer the question of after the temple was destroyed, how is faith in the God of Israel going to continue without a temple? And so rabbinic Judaism was constructed in many ways to answer that question. How can we as a people exist without a temple?
right.
And the New Testament absolutely addresses that question of how is faith in the God of Israel going to be able to expand beyond the religious Judaism of that day, which was based all in, temple worship, temple sacrifice. How's it going to expand to include the whole world? So we never tell people don't study Orthodox Judaism.
Right.
Study Orthodox Judaism, study the New Testament, and consider how we're supposed to live out our calling, our identity from God as Jewish people in this modern age without a temple, without a sacrificial system, and come to your own perspective based on those different points of view
Yeah.
on how we do that.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, when talking about post-exilic and post Second Temple destruction Judaism, we can see evidence start coming of a big body of work which religious Judaism is based around today. But for the person in this comment to say that Abraham, Moses, and David wouldn't have recognized our faith, faith in Jesus as a Jewish faith, they wouldn't have recognized it at all. I would say that the actual opposite is true. They wouldn't recognize religious Judaism as it is today. Abraham followed God's commandments, and understood through his personal covenant with God. His faith and obedience were foundational for later Jewish thought, but no Talmudic practices existed at his time. Moses, he's traditionally credited with receiving the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, directly from God. And every time the law is mentioned in the Old Testament, it's referring to the written law. During King David's reign, the focus was on the establishment of the monarchy, the building of the temple, and the development of Israel's religious and political structure. So while there were certainly religious practices and teaching based on the Torah, the Talmudic system of rabbinic authority, interpretation, and law didn't even exist yet. The religious system in David's time was centered on the temple, like you said, the temple
Right.
sacrifices and the priestly code, not on Talmudic discourse. So the Talmud was written long after their time. The Talmud, including both the Mishnah and the Gemara, was finished by the 6th century CE, with the Babylonian Talmud. This is really fascinating, actually. The Babylonian Talmud being the more widely studied and authoritative version in Jewish tradition. And this is so interesting because in the Tanakh, in Isaiah 2, verse 3, and Micah 4, verse 2, both say, the law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, not Babylon, from Jerusalem, from within Israel. And I see that as a direct connection to Yeshua, to Jesus, who came to the temple, brought the glory of God to the second temple, and his law, his word came forward from within Israel.
That's so good. I've never heard that before. I love that. You know what's so interesting to think about too is in Judaism, the destruction of the temple and the fact that we have to continue on our faith without the physical temple
Right.
is a tragedy. We mourn the destruction of the temple. But in the New Testament, it's the opposite. When Jesus died in the New Testament, it says, at the hour that he died, the curtain in the temple that separated the Holy of Holies, the curtain ripped from top to bottom. And that was enormously significant of Jesus' sacrifice meant that now anyone, whether you're clean or unclean, whether you're a priest or not, whether you're Jewish or not, anybody can go into God's presence. There's no longer a barrier anymore. And so we have a perspective of celebrating that God made a way for us to continue this faith, for everyone to come into his presence, that he provided that sacrifice, and that now his spirit goes out into the world through his followers. And I love what you said about it comes from Jerusalem and then it goes to the ends of the earth. That's amazing.
Yeah, and actually I want to piggyback on your point that you made here, and I was looking this up. This is actually from the Talmud, and this is from Yoma 39b, and this talks about that 40-year period after Jesus's death, burial, and resurrection, and the destruction of the second temple and what was happening in the temple at that time. And I'm going to read it from the Talmud, from this rabbinic Jewish religious source. It says, the sages taught, during the tenure of Shimon HaTzadik, the lot for God always arose in the high priest's right hand after his death. It occurred only occasionally, but during the 40 years prior to the destruction of the second temple, the lot for God did not arise in the high priest's right hand at all. So too, the strip of crimson wool that was tied to the head of the goat that was sent to Azazel did not turn white, and the westernmost lamp of the candelabrum did not burn continually. And so what
For 40 years.
during
Well,
the
and
40,
the
exactly.
temple was destroyed in 70 AD, so 40 years before that is 30 AD.
Right. And what this shows us from the Talmud itself is that the sacrifices that were being offered were not being accepted in the temple anymore. And these strange things were happening that were actually recorded in Jewish literature, which is just, it's just phenomenal. And to just really kind of bring the point home that something pretty amazing happened around 30 AD, prophesied by Daniel in chapter 9, that the Messiah had to be an atonement and cut off from his people before the destruction of the second temple, before the destruction of 70 AD. So, if this isn't Jewish, Arielle, I don't know what is.
Amen.
Yeah, we're going on to the third point here in this very rich and thick comment that this person made. How about encouraging Jews to know Judaism thoroughly before they unknowingly participate in a new faith full of idolatry? So I'm assuming this person is referring to post-Christian Judaism because, once again, biblical Judaism actually, from what we see in our study of the Tanakh, actually aligns with faith in Jesus and is far removed from the Judaism that we see today. What do you say?
I don't think that we ever have any intention of discouraging people from embracing and celebrating our heritage.
Right.
Our point is just that rabbinic Judaism is not the scriptures. It's man-made traditions, some of which are amazing, some of which we don't agree with. I think a lot of Jewish people today, though, really don't know the difference. They grew up and they know some traditions, and they don't know which ones are in our actual scriptures and which ones were made up by a rabbi,
Right. Wow.
in Russia a few hundred years ago or something. So I think the point is just that people should know the difference
Yeah.
between the two.
That's a really great point, because again, yesterday we were out on the streets of Tel Aviv talking to Jewish people. Some were religious, and they would quote things, and I said, I don't think that's from the Tanakh. And they said, it's not? I said, no. And they're like, oh, it's probably from the Talmud then. And more than one person said that yesterday, and they continues to quote from extra biblical sources. And one thing that I find fascinating is that when we're speaking with religious Jews, which we do a lot, in also a very loving way, we have great conversations, they'll use the term Torah, but they use the term Torah to mean many different things, including the Gemara, including the Mishnah, including the Talmud, as a whole. So when they say we study Torah, what they're really saying is that we study Talmud and rabbinic commentary, because we can't understand the heart of God and the Tanakh without rabbinic commentary, without the intercessory or the intermediary, which is the rabbi. We can't understand the Tanakh. So the fourth point is that you'll be called to account for your abominable misdeeds against God's chosen people. Well, we're all going to be called into account. I mean, the question is, where's the truth? That's the real question, in my opinion. If the religious Judaism of today, with its broken Mosaic covenant and dependency on the rabbis, is true, if that's true, I want to follow it. And if it's true, though, with the faith that I have today, I'm going to be held accountable. But if Jesus truly is the Messiah, who arrived right on time according to God's word in the book of Daniel, then this person who's making this comment will be held accountable. The goal is to be on the side of truth, no matter the cost. The next one is God's chosen people are not meant to join a foreign faith that Abraham, Moses, David would not have recognized, a faith based on human worship. It's a fact that 99.9% of all so-called newly saved Jews to Christianity have a non-religious background, zero knowledge of Judaism. I don't know where he got this percentage. And also, first of all, everyone was newly saved at some point, you know, and you and I both know many former Orthodox Jews who know a lot about Judaism who put their faith in Jesus. The next part about God's chosen people, it's a foreign faith. That's pretty repetitive. So let's just jump to the end, which I think is really fascinating. And it's a really great point to talk on. And I'm glad he made this comment. They usually have heavy baggage full of misery, according to a large number of testimonies. You know, these people that put their faith in Jesus, you know, they have heavy baggage full of misery, according to a large number of testimonies. And I did something kind of funny here. And I want to read a kind of like a testimony of someone. So the person says, I'm so done with everything. I cry like nonstop, and my bed's basically a puddle at this point. My eyes are so puffy, I can't even see straight, and it feels like the whole world is against me. It actually sounds kind of like some teenagers I know right now. Like my son comes home, my 16-year-old, and my son, a 16-year-old, comes home and he's like, yo, I got my friend's having a really, really hard time. She feels like the whole world is against her and she doesn't know what to do.
Everything's the end of
And
the world.
right, it's the totally end of the world. And I actually took a lament from King David and
Oh,
I turned it into something modern. And his lament reads the same. I am worn out from my groaning. All night long I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow. They fail because all of my foes. This sounds like some misery and some heavy baggage in Psalm 6, verse 6 through 7 by King David, doesn't it? I have another one. This is too much for me. I can't carry all these people by myself. If you're just going to keep doing this to me, then I'll just kill me already. Seriously, if I even matter to you at all, because I can't take it anymore. Maybe you can give a guess as to who this is talking about in the Old Testament.
I mean, it sounds like a leader because they
It
said
does.
all the
Totally.
people.
Totally. So this is actually Moses from the book of Numbers, chapter 11. I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin.
Wow.
Sounds like a lot of heavy baggage and misery.
I mean, who doesn't have baggage? I have yet to meet somebody with no baggage. I gotta say. Like, so really any person, if they're telling their story and they're being really transparent about where they've been, where they've come through, there's going to be some baggage. I don't think it's like because these are just the people that become Christians. I think humanity, right? Haven't you heard anyone said like, so everyone should do therapy? I feel like the generation today, it's like that's the mentality. Everyone should do therapy because why? Because we get it that everybody has baggage and that we need help. We cannot fix ourselves. We cannot release our baggage on our own. We need help. That's why we go to therapy. That's why people do all sorts of things, some of which have value, right? But then it's not surprising that many of those people ask spiritual questions as they're on that journey. Jesus himself also says something about this that I really love in the book of Matthew. Jesus was being criticized for spending a lot of time with people who were tax collectors,
Right.
prostitutes, people that others might have considered scum. And his answer to that was those who are healthy don't need a doctor like
Mhm.
those who are sick. And so his point being he came for people who are broken. And he came to make us whole. He came as the great physician. And so I don't think anything wrong with knowing that you're broken.
Right.
That's the first step to healing, right? And that's exactly who Jesus came for.
Wow. That's so beautiful. I mean, life is hard. And how amazing is it that not only Moses and David have a God that would reach down and lift them up and show them the way back to him when they're experiencing heavy baggage and full of misery, but we do too, which is just so
Oh,
beautiful.